is going to be these three.
It's working on cloud.
All right. So which cloud, as in which vendor and which offerings to choose from? The next is going to be why cloud. Few stories from my life. I had been using cloud, private, public, hybrid, since past 3-4 years since the cloud came into picture. So few stories, few snippets from my life, that how I have used it, whatever benefits or troubles I have faced by using cloud. Then how cloud. So how we actually go ahead and deploy. So before I begin, let me first try to figure out how many of you have ever used cloud as an infrastructure, as a service in your entire IT career. Anybody? Fantastic.
Everybody.
And how many of you are Amazon guys and how many of you are Microsoft guys? Amazon guys. Microsoft, Azure. Okay, not bad. Any other cloud provider?
I mean, we use the Eucalyptus as our cloud.
Oh, so you have a private cloud deployment?
Yeah.
Okay, it bursts to a public cloud as well?
No, just a private.
Not yet. Okay, that's great. And you, sir?
We added to Rackspace.
Oh, Rackspace, fantastic. So you're using OpenScale, basically. Okay, OpenStack, sorry. Okay, so great. So we have a bunch of guys who have already used cloud. We have a bunch of guys who are here who have ever never used cloud. Oh, that's good. So I think at least for 90% of the audience, my presentation is going to be helpful. For the rest 10%, can be a refresher, can be a good Q&A session. So let's see how this goes. Okay, so the first question is which cloud? Microsoft Azure, one offering. Rackspace, AWS, Amazon, GC, yet to be publicly available, which is Google Compute Engine, and a bunch of local players. So we have already seen that at least Rackspace, Azure, and AWS has been used by people sitting in this room. So anybody wants to give a small, like, two-liner on how was the experience? You, sir? Anybody? How was the experience of maybe using Azure? Anybody? Okay, so if not, then let me come back to this. I have been working with a lot of startups recently. Now, you know, when we talk about startups, the biggest challenge is to curb the capex, right? We don't have a lot of upfront money, but yes, we want to build something which needs scalability, which can suffice or which can be good enough for handling, let's say, 10,000, 50,000 users in a span of, let's say, 1 or 2 years. So in that kind of a scenario, what happens is we should start very agile, very small, with very minimal amount of resources and a very less investment, right? Correct? Yes, no? Right. Okay, so in that kind of a scenario, cloud could be very helpful. Now, why I have put these names here and why I am putting this particular example here is because when we talk about Azure, they don't provide you a free trial instance. Whereas when we talk about AWS, they have a free trial instance. So what I'm trying to say is, if you are let's say a startup, or let's say if you are actually going to try cloud on a smaller department of your large enterprise, don't want to start investing on it, or don't want to actually go to the CFO and ask for an approval. In that kind of a scenario, what you can do is you can select a company like this, a provider like this, start a free instance where you hardly pay 55 rupees or 100 rupees and start a site, which site can be later on scaled up to any limits. You can scale up to handling 10,000, 50,000, lakh users, or whatever you want to. So this is scalable, start at 55 rupees. I will come to specific examples later. So Amazon gives you that kind of a possibility, whereas Azure doesn't, because it doesn't let you publicly access a free site. Those free sites are generally controlled by Microsoft's domain, which is something like, let's say, testsite.microsoftazure.com or something like that. So you can't actually put a domain name, bind a domain name with an Azure site. Same goes for Rackspace. They also don't provide you a free, completely free instance, but Amazon does. So basically what I'm trying to say is, if you want to try, don't want to get a CFO approval, go try AWS. You get a feel of the entire ecosystem of cloud, how to use, how to start, how to migrate, how to configure the instances, how the scalability works. Once you are done with it, you select your right choice. Now, what are the other decision-making factors for selecting the correct vendor? Let's see if we have something in the slide. So here comes the choosing criteria. User access region latency. Now this is a very, very big thing. Let's assume that your website or whatever application, business app you are going to deploy on the cloud, that is going to have a lot of traffic from USA or going to have a lot of traffic from India. Now it makes a lot of sense that when you are deploying that, that site should be on that country so that you can save on latency, correct? Or international bandwidth. So if, for instance, in Indonesia, international bandwidth is expensive, whereas the countrywide bandwidth is cheap. So in that kind of a situation, you can actually save money and actually get better performance by making sure that whoever is your cloud vendor has a nearer data center deployment. So let's say for AWS or for Azure, the nearest option is Singapore. Whereas let's say if you talk about an Indian vendor like Control S, maybe they have a Hyderabad-based deployment. So in that kind of a situation, you might save on bandwidth and you might save on performance by selecting a local vendor. On the other hand, if your users are coming from USA and you are trying to get a vendor who is in Hyderabad, doesn't make any sense. You might be actually developing a site which is for USA users, right? So you need something which is locally available there, right? So this becomes very important in that kind of a scenario. So whenever you are selecting a vendor for cloud, go and check where all they have their data centers. And does that suit your requirement or not, right? So that is one very important criteria. Next, certifications and credentials. Now, cloud has always, please.
Is this presentation going to be
Available online? We can make it online. I don't know what is the structure here, but I will make sure that you get the presentation. Okay? Yeah.
So, would you have any data how much NCS you use if you host your data center or some other location? So, say you host your data center in America,
Right.
right? And the user base is in India.
Correct.
So, how much NC?
I can't recall of any specific survey which has done something like this, but it is very easy to check. You check a USA site by just running a standard ping command and see how much is the latency. So it's not a very difficult task to check, but I don't know if somebody has done a proper thorough research on it and provided it online or not. But yeah, obviously because the distance is there, so see, latency is directly proportional to the distance till the time the medium is safe, right? So it is absolutely equivalent to the distance. So if it is nearer to your location, it is going to be faster. If the latency is going to be less. If it is farther, it is going to be more. It's as simple as that.
So, as you said, let's say one of the data centers is hosted in Singapore.
Yeah.
And let's say another data center is hosted in America.
Correct.
So, Singapore is also quite a distance. from
Exactly,
India.
exactly. So Singapore might give you 60 millisecond response, whereas USA data center might give you 120 millisecond response, which is double. Now, when you are doing some kind of, when you are using an application which has a lot of chatty protocol usage, then that 120 millisecond adds up to a lot of time difference. So that's something. I have done a small survey on how latency kills bandwidth. I have a presentation on it. If you want, I can share it with you. We'll do that. Sure. Okay, so the next question, certifications and credentials. Now, this is very important. Cloud has always been into this cloudy environment and it's not secure, it is not safe. But on the contrary, I would say that it is safer than far many hosting service providers which are available here in India. But the difference is, whenever you talk about security, it is your responsibility. It is not the responsibility of the vendor. Let's say you are getting a standard hosting service provider, no cloud, nothing, standard regular hosted data center somewhere in, let's say, Bombay or in Hyderabad. You're getting anybody. Now the security of that, if it is open to the public, if the application you are hosting there and is open to the public, is your responsibility. And the same thing happens with cloud. But with cloud, what you get is, additionally, you get a lot of certifications and credentials when you buy or when you get a cloud instance. I will give you a small example here. So around a year back, I was working with a group of startups who were trying to develop a new site for which they needed to save their credit card information on the site. For that, you need to get a credential called PCI DSS. Have anybody heard of PCI DSS?
Yeah.
So you need to get that credential done. For that, there is a huge questionnaire you have to fill. You have to make sure that your data center has certain security mechanisms implemented. Your processes has certain things implemented. So a pretty hefty task to be done. Now, when we were trying to select a cloud vendor for that, what we came to know that AWS already had PCI DSS credentials with them. So a letter from AWS was more than enough for us to provide to the security auditors, and say that our infrastructure is already compliant. Now we talk about only the processes. So it saved at least 60% of our headache. So on the contrary, it actually turned out to be cheaper, faster, and secure for us. So basically the perception here, I just need to change a small perception, and the perception is when you are getting an instance on cloud, you are also getting all those accreditations and credentials along with it. You don't have to pay extra for it. It's already there. So for instance, AWS, they have HIPAA compliance, they have CIPA compliance, they have PCI DSS compliance, they have ISO 27001 compliance. So all these compliances are already there. You get an instance, you already get your instance hosted on an environment which has all those credentials there. So you don't have to bother about it. You can go and download a certificate from their site, provide that to your auditor, and you are settled. So fantastic. It saves a lot of headache. Okay, legal requirements. Legal requirements is a very tricky thing. So now I have seen that the global players always has better pricing and better features. But there might be certain requirements where government mandate says that you can't host your data outside your country boundaries. In that case, obviously you have to select a vendor which is local. They might be slightly more expensive, or they might not have certain features which you're looking for. But because you are trying to adapt to cloud, and at the same time you want to make sure that you are bound to the legal requirements, you have to make sure that you comply with that. So that could be a reason for selecting your vendors. So this is also a very key criteria to see. Next, available features and feature sets.
So this legal requirements would apply to transactional businesses?
Exactly, to transactional businesses, to legal firms. So many segments have this compulsion that, so for instance, I was working for a petroleum company recently, and they also have some requirements that certain set of data should not leave the country boundaries. So there are certain segments, certain usage where you have to make sure that, okay, that data has to be in the country or in the specific region. You have to make sure that happens.
So in the choice set that you've actually given a provider, would some of them get knocked off for transactional?
Absolutely, because none of the major players as in the international players today, has a presence in India. They don't have a data center in India. So be it AWS or Azure or Rackspace, none of them today has a data center in India. So you have to go with somebody who has a data center locally available in India, who might be a smaller player, might be more expensive, but you have to choose him because it's a legal foundation. So that's what I'm trying to make here. Okay, so available, sorry. Yeah.
Is it possible to switch the operator later on?
It is a migration process. It depends on your application. Yes, absolutely possible, but it depends on how your application is bound with the architecture you are using. So, for instance, let's say you are using any specific PaaS features of Microsoft Azure, which is not supported in, let's say, a data center or a cloud provided by controllers. So there might be a disconnect. So you have to figure that out. If it is let's say a standard blog or standard e-com website, obviously you can migrate it. It is a standard migration process, server to server migration process. So there this available feature set becomes important. So which all features you are going to use? If you are going to use common features, which features are available across the board, then your migration becomes easier. If you are using some specific features which are not available across the board, then it becomes difficult. But that is sorry. You have a question?
Regarding the legal requirements. These are usually most stringent in Western European countries and the US to some extent.
Correct. UAE for that matter.
Yeah. So if we are serving some clients over there in those regions,
Correct.
currently there are no issues with any of the major providers.
No.
Right? So every major
UK, Amazon, Azure has UK, US data centers, Singapore data centers. The problem comes when you're talking about India or you're talking about UAE.
So do we have split laws like that in India as well?
There are certain segments. I'm not a legal guy, but yeah, there are certain segments which are. So you have to hunt for yourself. I'm sorry, but yeah, there are certain. I'm very sure about the legal sites. They have certain regulations that they have to keep their data locally available. So there are certain things. Okay, so available feature is straightforward. You have to see that whether the provider meets your requirements or not, right? So let's say you are going to deploy SQL Server cluster, Microsoft SQL Server cluster. Now, does your provider which you are selecting has that functionality or not? This is a straightforward thing. You have to see what you need, and you have to see whether the vendor provides that or not. Okay, so what we have next? Compatibility with your existing apps. Okay, now this becomes slightly important. In case of PaaS offerings, now how many of you are aware of, I am using this PaaS and IaaS words and SaaS words. How many of you are aware of these words? Okay, majority of you, and for those who don't, I'll just quickly, I have a slide on that as well, but quickly I'll just give the full forms at least. PaaS is essentially platform as a service, where you, on the cloud, get a service, let's say, get a IaaS instance and a SQL instance, not a proper machine, but a IaaS and a SQL instance, which you can configure to operate or to run a website. On the contrary, IaaS is something where you get a virtual machine which can be scaled up and down depending on the requirement, but the entire maintenance and installation and implementation of web servers, of mailing or whatever is done by you. So it is a virtual machine given to you. SaaS is just the application. You just go and buy an email server where you can just go and create email accounts and start using it, or you go and buy something like Salesforce. CRM, you just go start creating users and start using it. So it's an application available online, you don't bother about anything else, go create users and start using it. Gmail, for instance, is a SaaS application, right? So, okay, so back to this. So when you are using a PaaS application, there might be cases where your code uses the APIs of the cloud service provider. Now you have to make sure that your code which you are building can support those APIs. So for instance, if you have a very old Microsoft ancient code, or let's say if you have, let's say, a Microsoft SQL 2005 database, that might not get directly ported or through the wizard to SQL Azure, right? Whereas if you have a later version of SQL database, that can be easily ported. I'm just giving you an example. So this kind of requirements, this kind of features has to be checked prior, right? So we are actually running through a process right now where we are trying to port an existing application to SaaS. Now the problem is the database structure is not supported on Azure. So we are trying to figure out that should we use PaaS or should we use IaaS and build our own, install our own SQL server and do the applications manually. So that kind of things has to be taken care of. Okay, so some quick demystifications. I think I already did this. IaaS, PaaS and SaaS. EC2 and Windows Azure. Anybody knows what is EC2? Heard of this term? I'm sure many of you will have. Anybody? Elastic Compute 2 or version 2. Windows Azure is the Windows version of an instance. Basically, there's nothing but a virtual instance which can be scaled up and down. So when you create a virtual machine on, let's say, VMware, what you do? You actually take a machine, you put some resource to it, and you start it up. And it becomes a normal server on your network which can be configured, installed, you can put something on it, start using it, get an IP connected to it, start accessing it, right? So EC2 or Windows Azure is basically that. You get a virtual machine on the cloud which you can start operating. So this is the base of any IaaS offering. It's a virtual machine. We'll try to create a virtual machine and see how this works. Now these virtual machines can be rebooted on different hardware resources. So you can make a virtual machine with 1 core and 720 MB of RAM, and after half an hour you can reboot it with 16 cores and 16 gig of RAM. So you can do all those things. EBS and VHD. These are basically the virtual hard drives on cloud. EBS is the terminology for AWS, VHD is the terminology for Microsoft Azure. So this is the virtual hard drive, essentially. S3 or blob storage. This is the cloud variant of a SAN. So this is shared storage on the cloud. So on AWS this is called S3, and on Azure this is called blob storage. So there is a SAN, cloud variant of SAN. RDS and SQL Azure. These are platform as a service example of SQL databases. So you can get a database instance which is managed by the cloud provider. You just go and port your existing database to it and you forget about anything else. Scaling up, scaling down is taken care by the cloud service provider. On Amazon, this is called RDS, and on Azure, this is called SQL Azure. So I'm just giving you this name so that when we actually go on and start creating certain applications on the cloud, into a demo, you are at least familiar with these terminologies, if you are still not. Elastic IP, nothing but an IP. This IP can be immediately allocated, purchased and allocated to a server on the cloud. You can just go buy a IP, connect it to a machine, start using it. Disconnect it, put it to another machine, start using it. So these are some terminologies which you should know when you are starting with cloud, so that you know that what you are trying to create and what the manual is saying. So that's the whole agenda. Okay, so let's go to the story. And I'll just take a quick 2-minute pause and start a download so that we can still continue with the demo. Okay, actually need SSH client on this machine so that I can actually connect to a cloud when we are doing the demo. So I'm just checking if this machine has a client, else we have to download them quickly. As Firefox is starting, we will still keep going on. Okay, so cloud for agility. Recently, a large organization was expanding and building a new division. The projected capex for the new setup was somewhere around. Please come. Hello. Uh-oh, that's not good.
That's not
We- This is not Azure, this is actually AWS. Yeah, this is Microsoft, exactly. You can say so.
Is it Azure?
No, it is not. It's just a PowerPoint. Just a, oh, sorry.
So while you're bringing up any demystifications on the licensing
Licensing of what?
of Microsoft products? So
See, these are all OPEX. These are all pay as you go. So there is no licensing involved. You are actually paying the licensing cost in your monthly installments. So let's say if you are getting a Windows Server 2012 on Microsoft Azure or on AWS, you pay a certain amount of money. Now that money includes the infrastructure cost and the licensing cost. So there is no additional license you have to buy or acquire for that.
So if someone has IaaS, infrastructure as a service,
We have a mic here, which can be used.
probably I can speak louder.
You can shout, yeah, please.
If someone is trying to get an infrastructure as a service,
Yeah.
and they already have Windows 2008 server licensing,
Okay.
can they transfer that licensing?
There are certain options. You have to talk with Microsoft for that, and there are possibilities where you can do it. Possible.
Any demystifications you can do on Oracle as well?
Not on Oracle. If you want, we can take it offline. We can see.
Okay.
I can check with those guys as well.
Yeah. But they don't do any cloud.
Okay. It's going to crash again. No, hi. Okay, so this was the projected cost for that new division development. 3 lakh operational cost. Application development cost was around 15 lakhs. Hardware and infrastructure cost was around 25 lakhs. So this was the projected cost for a large organization which I was working for. They were actually trying to start a new division. So this was the projected cost. Now what happened? But after 6 months, they had to shut this new division down due to whatever business reasons. So they started building the application was up, the operation costs were also incurred more or less, but because of some business reasons, they had to shut that division completely down. The decision indeed caused a lot of upfront losses, but the tech team did something very, very innovative. And what happened was, operational cost the same, application development cost was also the same, but for the hardware and infrastructure cost, they incurred 12,500 rupees only. Because when they were developing the entire site in a traditional environment, what would have happened? That they would have thought of the maximum possible requirement for the infrastructure, would have bought all those servers, deployed on the data center, and started using it. Is it my phone? Sorry. Yeah. So they would have bought all the infrastructure, put it, installed it, spend the money, and done. And when they actually shut the division down, those servers either had to be reused somewhere else where it was not needed, or had to be stored without any usage. So, but just because they didn't do that and they went to cloud, they saved a lot of money, because what was happening was, at the time of development, they were not paying a lot of money. They didn't require a lot of infrastructure at the back end. What they were needed was to just run the base application which they have developed, test it, do the prototyping, get the payment gateway integrated, and all those things. So they did it on a very small instance, which was not even up for the entire time. So let's say for a month, they were running the instance for 15 days, and that too at a very, very small infrastructure setup. So by doing that, for that first 3-4 months, they just incurred 12,500 rupees instead of 25 lakhs. So yes, they had a loss on application development and on operational cost, but they somehow managed to save a lot of money in the infrastructure. This fits Hassan. Exactly, exactly. In this context. No, it will not be. That's what is the beauty of it. So if let's say the application needed Oracle database at the back end, what this guys would have done, it was not the case with this guys, but yeah, in that case what they would have done is, they would have taken a RDS instance of Oracle, which is like monthly, which is a monthly recurring cost of let's say a few hundred rupees or few thousand rupees, and they would have got the licensing also broken up in that same monthly installment. So if you buy any application on the cloud, the licensing is already embedded in the monthly billing. So you save on that licensing cost as well. So in this case, it was not Oracle, it was a MySQL setup, but still they save on the infrastructure at least. If it was Oracle or a MS SQL database, then they would have saved a lot of money on the licensing as well here. So that is a very good question. So how they did it, I already explained. By converting the capex to opex. They took the capex and put it on opex. They started paying monthly and only for what they were using it for. So if they were needing 1 core and let's say 2 GB of RAM to run that prototype site and to get everything attested and validated and all those payment gateway integrations done, they would have done that. And they would not have been running it on a 24 core and a 16 gig machine, which would have been the final requirement. Because at any point of time, they had the capability of rebooting the machine on the same, on that maximum required configuration. And if they would have done also that kind of a deployment for let's say 15 days on the entire month, they would have just paid for that 15 days, not for the entire tenure of 6 months. So they saved a lot of money here. Okay, stage 2, auto scaling for dummies. When we say cloud scaling, the first thing which comes to our mind is auto scaling. How many of you have heard of auto scaling? Anybody have heard of auto scaling? Can you please, just one line on what is auto scaling?
Yeah, in the presentation that we go to in the auditorium, it was explained that whenever we host our application on the cloud, it might be possible that the usage of that application increases drastically during certain point of time because of say we are using a media application and some mishap happens and people start hitting that site very frequently, and so the number of hits go up very drastically.
Absolutely.
So that's what it is all about.
Correct. So you are absolutely right, sir. I will just try to explain it in a much simpler manner. Any website or any kind of site, any kind of application which gets a lot of traffic, the traffic peaks and the traffic drops, right? It is not that you are getting the same type of traffic throughout the day or throughout the month, right? It can reach up to let's say a point of lakh users per hour, and it can drop to a point where you get 200 users per day. I'm just giving an example. So it peaks and it drops, right? Now that kind of a scenario, what you have to generally in a traditional environment do is to buy servers which can sustain the maximum peak load, correct? So if let's say in the entire year your server is going to reach that peak for 2 days. So for example, you are selling World Cup tickets. Only at the time of World Cup, that server is going to peak. The rest of the year, it might not see even a single, I'm not saying that's a bad thing to say, but yeah, it might not see that much of traffic coming in. But at the actual required hours, it will shoot up to like 1,000 times or something like that. That kind of a scenario, what you do is you provision for the maximum possible requirement, right? How do you do it? Generally, in any setup, you don't have one server doing that. You have a cluster of servers doing it, right? So you have let's say 50 web servers and 20 database servers running on a clustered mode, which takes the queries and serves the queries in standard load balancing configuration manner, which is a very good thing to do. On cloud, you can do the same thing, but you can save cost by doing a very small trick, which is whenever there is a trigger, let's say the load increases, the CPU load increases, or let's say the RAM consumption increases, or let's say the hits on the Apache server or whatever server you're using increases, it automatically starts booting new machine in the cluster. You can set a maximum and a minimum, that okay, maximum machine will be 20, So if let's say somebody, God forbid, attacks your site and your site traffic suddenly shoots up to few million, it doesn't start 500 servers and start billing for that. So you give a maximum cap, let's say 20 servers, and you configure one server as the default main head node. It starts getting the traffic. The moment it reaches the threshold, let's say the CPU utilization reaches somewhere around 8, it automatically starts a new server in the same cluster, and that server will become a part of the cluster and start serving the request. It goes higher, one more server turns up. It goes even higher, one more server turns up. The moment the load starts reducing, the server will start stopping. Now in cloud, you are only paying, or you only pay for whatever you are using. So for those moments where you are actually using 50 servers, you are paying for 50 servers. The moment those servers shut down and you are on a one server, you are paying for one server. So if you are actually getting a hit of 1 million users twice a month, you only pay twice a month for that much of load, not the entire month. That's why you see. So that is auto scaling. But that is good for huge infrastructures, not huge, mid-size or bigger infrastructures. Let's say you have a small city, which exactly. So it's 20, 30, exactly. So that calculation you have to do, sir. On runtime, you can, absolutely can. I didn't got that question. Which limit are we talking? We're talking about number of maximum machines, or we're talking about the CPU load limits? Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And till 88 I was expecting it to be used. Now on the right hand basis, if it increases more than 100, in that case, will the user be able to find that it has been increased to more than 100? And
which user you're talking about? Somebody accessing the site, or the admin you're talking about as the user?
Admin.
The admin, yeah. You can set an alert for that. Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely. Obviously. That is true. So that's it. So what were we? Okay. So I just lost track. Okay. So that's what auto scaling is. So this is for medium and large size deployments. So now let's say you have a small site, tiny little site, which is good enough with a single server with, let's say, 8 GB of RAM and let's say 8 cores or something like that, right? What do? So this is your first step to cloud, and still you want to use the auto scaling, and still you want to make sure that you don't spend much, you don't waste a lot of money. What you can do? You can simply reboot, and you can automate that reboot as well. So for instance, what I have done recently, I was actually, okay, so, okay, this is done. So, what I did is, I was recently actually consulting a small stock image site who sells stock photographs. Now, they are right now working on a lot of marketing activities, and is it? Okay, so I was actually looking for a stock image site, and they recently are into a lot of marketing activities, and they are planning to get a lot of traffic now. Right now they are getting hardly any traffic, some 200, 300, 400 users per day kind of a traffic they are getting right now, but they are expecting more. So I migrated them from a local deployment to a cloud deployment. Now they said, okay, we are on the cloud and we are yet to see that happen. How do we still manage cost? How do we still make sure that we can still squeeze out as much of money from that deployment? So what I did was very small and tiny thing. So they're running this site on a single server, so I can't do a auto scale up or auto scale down. They are already on a small medium sized server with, let's say, 5 cores and 2 GB of RAM, which is very decent, small stuff. What I did was, I wrote a script which reboots that server every night at 12 o'clock to a smaller instance, which is cheaper. And every morning at 8 AM, it again reboots to a slightly higher size instance. Simple, just a 2-line script. I was planning to show you, but again the laptop issue, I don't have a putty or a Excel client here. I will still try to do it after I finish the presentation. So I did the small little cron tab, 2 lines, 2 scripts. It reboots the server, and what happened? This is the actual figures I am showing you, the actual billing cycle figures. So you can see the first month, in the month of December, they incurred $317 Whereas the next month when I implemented this 2-line script, they incurred $275, which is a 13% straight saving on a small size. So you can see when you scale up, when you scale large, when you do more auto scaling and more optimization, how much you can save. This is a small little tiny example. Still straightforward 2-line script saving 13%. Okay. So the point I'm trying to make here is very simple. The point I'm trying to make here is to go to cloud, to start deploying on cloud, and to start getting the benefit out of cloud, benefit out of the scalability feature of cloud is not difficult. Anybody with any small test requirement can also go on and see it happening. I'm not saying that you take your entire existing large website to the cloud and start playing around with it and see what happens. You start with your smaller divisions, smaller applications, smaller trial applications, put it on the cloud, see what happens, see how you can optimize it. When you start learning it, when you start utilizing it, then go on, then carry on, then migrate your existing huge deployment to the cloud. That's what is the way to do. Okay, but Kaspersky antivirus is a problem which we have. Okay, next, story number 3. Okay, a startup story again. Now this is a small, tiny little website which we are building. Actually, not a tiny little website. We are going to launch it in a few weeks' time. It's a very nice website which is going to enable payments over Facebook. So right now the site is live, it's operational, it is available on the internet to be accessed, but the website is still functional, but it's still in its restricted beta. So we have given rights to few guys who can come, try it out, test it, right? So it is not open for public yet, and the load is negligible. So hardly 10-15 guys are accessing it every day. Now guess how much we are paying for it? Just a wild guess, how much we are paying for this? 2 guys in this room are not eligible for this answer because they know what we are paying. Everybody else is. Yes, any figure. How much we will pay, please? Exactly, you are right. So we are paying 0 per month for this. We are running it on AWS. The site is live. It has a HTTPS certificate. It has a payment gateway integrated. Everything done, but no payments yet because we are running it on a small micro instance which is free on AWS. And we can scale it at any point of time. We just need to do a reboot and we get 16 cores and 16 GB of RAM at any point of time, like that. I will actually try to demonstrate that at least, if not the rest of the things. So this is how this goes, and the same setup can be scaled to 10,000 users with a single reboot. So that's what it is. Now let's quickly jump to the demo because we don't have much time and we need a lot of time for Q&A as well. So what I'm going to do is I might be skipping the connectivity part because I don't have the SL client here. I'll still try to show you how the standard cloud interface looks and how do you create machines and all those things. Pardon? Will take a lot of time. So I think we should take that offline. So I will give you my credentials. You can reach me anytime and you can do some good things. Yeah, please. Prerequisites? You have to be a IT guy. That's all. If you can go and create a Facebook login page, you can go and create a instance on cloud. No, sorry, what?
What are the technical skills required for that?
Technical requirement for creating an instance on cloud and launching a WordPress site on cloud is exactly as what you need for creating a Facebook profile. It's completely self-driven. All the extra thing you need is a credit card. You need a credit card to validate yourself. They charge $1 when you create an account just to see that your credit card is valid, and you can go and create it, and later on when you actually start using it, you can pay with that credit card. That's all they check, and it's completely self-driven. Next, go. You get an interface. The only thing you will require were those acronyms which I was talking about, those EBS volumes and those EC2s and those S3s. You should know what they are. They are essentially nothing but disks, machines, IPs, that's all. Regular thing which you play on a standard network with. That's what it is, but just the names are different. So you have to just know that what these things are and you can go on and create an instance immediately. I will actually try to give you a demo of that. Yeah. I will check with these guys. I'm sure they have a website for that. The organizers, I will check with them. I'm sure they have. Excuse me, sir. Hello. How are we going to make the presentation available to the audience? Upload on the
Inflexion site.
Oh, fantastic. So it's going to be available on the site. Great. Okay, so let me quickly connect to the internet and show the demo. The basic difference is the scalability. On a shared hosting, you have to call your hosting provider and ask, brother, please give me 2 more servers. They will take their own sweet time to do it, right? If you have to even shed out a few servers, you have to again go through the same process. With this is self-driven. You can go reboot a server with a new configuration. You can go create a new server instantly. You don't need anybody's help. You don't have to call anybody. Everything is self-driven and automated.
But logically, they provide us unlimited bandwidth and unlimited internet.
Well, unlimited, how can they provide unlimited on a shared server? At the end of the day, it is,
I don't know that stuff, but on return they provide that.
well, see, basically they judge your requirement and basis that they go on and say, okay, this is going to be unlimited. But if you actually go ahead and see your requirement, I will not name a site which is a current e-com site running out there in the market. They use a similar offering and they pay around 85,000 rupees per month for that unlimited hosting, which is a decent, well-known site. I'm not naming it. They're an e-com site. They are paying that much of money. When we actually sat down and did the entire calculation for that and how much resource they require, and we quoted them on AWS, they're spending 12,000 rupees per month for the same requirement, but that is not unlimited. That is limited, this thing, which can be scaled up and down depending on the requirement, but that's what they needed. So you might not require unlimited and pay that much. And then that unlimited is not truly unlimited. When you actually start seeing million hits, it's going to fail because at the end of the day, it is a single server running at the back end. And that too shared with 500 guys. Sorry, somebody had a question. Yeah.
Actually, you told about auto scaling. So
Yeah.
auto scaling in terms of website you were telling, that is okay.
Correct.
If load comes up, so you can just add on or you can just rest 4 or 5 other instances or like that. But in a case of like licensing of Microsoft, so they charge on a core basis or CPU basis.
Correct.
So when we add these servers up now, so how licensing part should be justified or like?
I've already explained it twice. I'm doing it thrice, no issues, because this is a very, very crucial thing to understand, because this is slightly different from the traditional way of how we perceive the licensing. In this case, there is nothing called licensing. In this case, what you are buying is a OpEx machine with the application installed. So when you go on, let's say Amazon, and you say that I need a Windows Server 2012 instance, medium-sized instance with, let's say, 2 cores or 5 cores or whatever, and a SQL Web Edition, right? The amount which I am paying per month, or rather per hour for that instance, includes the price for the licensing. So let's say I have one server with that particular specific requirement. I'm paying for that server only. The moment I get one more server, I start paying for that as well. So at the moment I shut it down, the licensing and the infrastructure cost is immediately stopped. This is at a recurring basis. You are not paying.
Okay, that is okay. But if you talk about like application like SharePoint, SharePoint
Correct,
application,
correct.
that is I think not included in this kind of thing. So
Microsoft SharePoint, Azure has recently launched a service for SharePoint as well. So you have that as a shared licensing model where you can actually go and get an instance with SharePoint installed, and you pay along with the infrastructure, you pay the licensing price as well, which is subsidized obviously. So this there. But yeah, what you are trying to say, I think I have understood. You are trying to say that if there is a specific application which is not directly provided by the vendor, then how do you manage the license? Exactly, that's what you are trying to say, right? In that case, yes, you can't do auto scaling without actually acquiring all those licensing. That is a matter of fact. But yeah, exactly. Correct. Absolutely correct. So you have to make sure that that happens. But again, if it is a big brand, like let's say Semantic you're talking about, like Riverbed you're talking about, they already have specific customized offerings from for cloud. So you can actually go and talk with them. There are instances where you can actually, this is actually called bring your own license, bring your own license, BYOL. You can use your existing license on the cloud, or you can strike a deal where you say that okay, we are going to use auto scaling, where we are going to use 20 servers for let's say 10% of the month's duration, and rest of the time this much servers are going to be live, and let's strike a deal where I pay you this much lump sum and I get this many number of licenses for all those things. So this kind of possibilities are there in the market, because cloud is something which has been there since past 2.5 years, and people are seeing this kind of requirement. So bigger brands understand and acknowledge this and provide you a deal where you can manage this. And even bigger brands who have a cloud offering like Microsoft, like Azure, like Oracle, they already have that embedded into the system, and you can just go and buy it right there. I think that answers the question. Yeah, sorry, please.
It's fun.
We are on Q&A, and in the meanwhile I'll try to show a demo also if the internet works. Yeah. Correct. I didn't exactly got it. Please repeat. Correct. Absolutely. Correct. Into the system, into the instance. Yeah. Correct. It is per machine. It is per virtual instance. So if you are running it on one machine, that machine has the license. It's like. Mhm. To connect to that service? Okay, so in that case now which application is it and how are they providing the license has to be taken care of. So basically when you talk about a web server, which is straightforward, but there is no limit on the client connecting to it. But let's say if it's a specific application you're talking about, then obviously you have to see the licensing options provided by that particular application. Now cloud can't do anything here. You can just host that application on cloud, but that application is not coming from that cloud feature set. You have to buy it separately, you have to see that how they are licensing it. So it is like you are running that on the cloud server, that's all. That's where the cloud story ends. After that comes the story where you are actually talking with that application provider and seeing that how they are licensing it. Exactly, and if you are doing auto scale, then you have to mention that okay, the maximum number of servers are going to be this much, and minimum is going to be this much. This is going to be the standard duration when we are going to use the maximum strength. So let's take a deal, let's negotiate and get a better deal. So that kind of a thing has to be done. Yeah, please. Correct. See, basically vertical and horizontal scaling are nothing but increasing the volume of the machine and increasing the number of machines. Correct. This is pretty straightforward. Now, increasing the volume or increasing the infrastructure of the machine is easier to do, but the problem is there is a limit to it. You can't go infinite. There's a limit. There is a size which is the max. Let's say a extra large quadruple server instance on Amazon is there. It might have, let's say, 32 cores and let's say 60 gigs of RAM. I'm giving an example. I don't remember it off yet, but yeah, I'm giving an example. But it has a limit that can survive, let's say, 50,000 users. But the moment you increase to 60,000 users, what do you see? The only option available to you is to scale horizontally. You have to add more servers, right? You have to add more servers on the same cluster and start servicing it. So that's how this works. Yeah, please. Yep. A very, very interesting question. Now, this involves a lot of things. This involves, first of all, you have to figure out your existing application and its basic requirements, right? So now there could be certain things which can be, see, basically whenever you go to cloud or you start using cloud, there are two approaches. One is the IaaS approach, one is the PaaS approach. Now with PaaS approach, it becomes easier for you to manage it because you are not managing servers and instances, you are rather managing just service. That's all. So you are managing a web server or you are managing a DB server. Now, but that becomes trickier because you have a legacy application which might not be supported by this particular application, by this particular feature set. What do? You actually first sit and audit your entire code base, your entire DB and see whether it can fit existing cloud PaaS offering or not. If that is not possible, you sit, rewrite it, redo it, optimize it for that, then you take it to the PaaS. If that looks to be impossible for you, what you do? You take an IaaS offering, you take the entire stuff, use cloud as infrastructure, that's all. Put your existing stuff, your existing database server, your existing version of database server, version of web server, put it, load it, start using it. So, there are many utilities, but I would rather prefer you go to a guy who understands this and audits it for you. There's not a very good approach to audit it internally because the internal team might skip many things which an external auditor will not. I am right now facing this issue, that's why I am telling it to you. There are two guys sitting in this room who are doing this with me right now, and I am really facing a hard time to manage that. And to make sure that my management understands that it is good to spend that 3 lakh extra and get an external auditor come, do that audit, and get away with good solution to me because he already has an experience of how that code can be optimized for you. Right? So that would be a better approach according to me. Okay, so let's try to see if the internet works. Right. think we hardly have 5 minutes. We'll keep going on with the Q&A. It looks like the demo is going to be a bit of a pain, but I'm still trying to see if it can be managed. Any other questions? Sorry. Oh, yeah, please. Scalability is hourly basis. Hourly basis for instances and monthly basis for storage. There's a trick there, so that has to be taken care of properly. Okay, I will give you a very interesting example which happened recently with me. A friend of mine came to me and said, okay, I need to learn cloud. What should I do? I said, okay, go to Amazon or Azure or whatever. Create a small instance, micro instance, right? Micro instance is free. You are going to be billed for 55 rupees. That's all. It is the only amount. And then you can get a nice instance. You can start playing with it, see how it works, how to connect, and all those things. So very easy and straightforward. He went. He did that. Very nice. After a month, he called me. यार मेरा ना $5 का बिल आ गया. It is not a huge amount, but कैसे आ गया? It is supposed to be free. How did this happen? Now guess how did that happen? Anybody guess? Because it's supposed to be free. How did that guy enter $5? Pardon? No, he didn't. No. No. What he did was, he was slightly more clever and he shut that machine down. He was not using it throughout the month, so he turned the machine off. So like, ठीक है यार, मतलब चलता है तो free है, बंद होगा तो free होगा. Logic says so, exactly. But when you actually shut a machine down, and if you have taken an IP, elastic IP, you have attached it with the machine. If it is attached, it is not built. If it is not attached, it is built. So he shut the machine down, the IP got disassociated with the instance, he started getting billed. And he got a $5 bill at the end of the month. Why this happens? There's a reason behind it. Amazon says that I can create an account online and I can get, let's say, 500 IPs, but I am not using it. If I am not using it, I am actually blocking 500 of their IPs and they are not getting any benefit out of it. So what they say is, you take IPs, if it is connected to an instance, I am anyways going to make money by the instance charges, right? But if you are not using it with the instance, you still pay me, because you might be just blocking my IPs and not doing anything with it. So that's why they charge on inactive IPs but don't charge on the active IPs, because active IP they are anyways charging. Now this backfires on a micro instance, because on a micro instance, when it is working, it is running, it is fine, there is no charge. The moment you shut it down, the IP is released, it starts getting billed. So there is fine, small little things which needs to be taken care. I think we don't have the time for the demo, so I will just quickly run through two more very important slides which are very, very important. So I think these guys are going to come and throw me out of the stage because we are already running out of time. Alright. Okay, so few concerns. Now there is nothing in the world which don't have a few concerns. And cloud is no different. So the first concern is, who in God's name runs a data center on his credit card? Nobody, right? But on cloud, when you go and you start an account, what you do is you provide your credit card information and you start getting billed on that card. There are instances where people have managed to talk to Amazon and to Azure and say that give me an invoice and we will do the billing and we'll do a proper check-based billing, but that is not a standard case. If you are a huge deployment, then they can still listen to you, but for a medium-sized deployment, they don't really listen to you. The only mechanism of paying is through credit cards. Now credit cards might run out, and if it runs out, your data center might run out. So that's a major issue. I have faced it. Diwali season, did a lot of shopping. Suddenly my website stopped working because I didn't have any money in my credit card. So that can happen. That's a major issue. So it has to be tackled very, very wisely. Or if you are big enough, go talk to these vendors and say, hey, I don't run my data center on a credit card. Give me a normal credit check based or DD based or whatever based billing mechanism. This does not work. So that's the way to do it. Next. Computer resources, IOPS are not free. Nothing is free on cloud except one microinstance. Even the things which you don't even see, like input-output operations per second, IOPS, they are also billed. You get 1 million IOPS per month for free. After that, it also gets billed. So you pay around 0.11 cent for 1 million IOPS, which sounds to be a lot, but let's say you just forgot to run ping command on 5 machines. You will end up utilizing 1 million IOPS in a month, and then it will start incurring cost. So there are things which has to be very, very wisely monitored and what you are using. Storage is paid, IOPS is paid, even bandwidth is paid, everything is paid. There is a cap, there is a free segment which you have to see for every vendor. It is different. You have to see and you have to make sure that you budget it properly. It might look that your entire costing is going to be, let's say, X amount, but when the bill comes, it might actually you might actually find it to be 2x or 1.5x. It is not because they are cheating you, it might be because you are not reading the finance. So everything is paid, and all the vendors have their own combination and permutation for charging it. It has to be checked thoroughly. So IOPS, storage, IPs, associated IPs, disassociated IPs, on instances, off instances, everything has different billing cycles. Storages, utilized storages, snapshots, S3 volumes, everything is differently built. So that has to be checked properly. A CFO has to sit along with you and understand the entire thing. So this is very important. Pardon? You have to read. The only possible solution here is to read the entire fine print properly. Sorry. Shut it down for the IP, obviously. So you have to you have to see which one, by doing what you can save more. So, yes, so you shut it down and you not just dissociate the IP, release the IP. So there are two things. One is the IP is attached with the machine, and the IP and you are not blocking the IP, you are actually releasing it out. So if you release it, then again it is not built, obviously. So you can do that. So there are ways. Okay, neither their backup is free. So obviously, so for backup, for snapshots, for storage you have to pay. Everything is built. 30 GB on Amazon is free. After that, everything is built. 1 million IOPS is free. After that, everything is built. 720 hours of a micro instance is free. After that, everything is built. So these are some fine prints. You have to see, you have to look at it. It's not very expensive if utilized optimally. But if you miss something, I know some Microsoft evangelist was testing Azure, forgot to shut his server down, and at the end of the month he got a 25,000 rupees bill. And Microsoft completely refused to do anything because it's obvious, because you have been using the resource. It's not a fault of Microsoft. You have been using the resource for whatever. If you have forgot to shut it down, it's not Microsoft's fault. So they will anyways go and charge it to you. So it has to be checked properly. Make sure your vendors has the right security accreditations and certifications. So as I was saying, if you are going for an e-com site which needs to save your credit card information, then your provider should have a PCI DSS compliance. Else you can't go. Now, the flip side, I have talked good about it, that okay, when you go with Amazon, let's say you get PCI DSS along with it. But assume your vendor don't have that accreditation. What do? You can't even get it audited because you don't know where it is running. If the auditor comes, he will ask you कि ये कौन से data center के कौन से rack के कौन server पे चल रहा है. I will visit and see and audit it. You can't, because nobody knows where is it running. It is running on somewhere in Singapore data center, in some rack, in some data center. You reboot it, it starts somewhere else. So the flip side is this. So if the accreditation is not there, then getting the audit done is even more difficult. Next, security is your responsibility. Now this is a very, very big thing. Everybody says cloud is not. I'm done. Last one. Cloud is not safe. Cloud is insecure. Anything is not safe if it is not taken properly. The security is not at all the responsibility of the cloud vendors. They give it a damn till the time their resources are not misused, right? But if you are hosting it, you have to make sure you have your firewalls up, you have your antivirus up, you have everything up. Now the beauty is when you go on the cloud infrastructure, you can actually buy appliances of firewalls, of antiviruses, of everything right then and there on the cloud. So you don't have to actually go and buy an appliance box. You can buy a virtual machine which already has, let's say, give me a name for a UTM solution. Let's say Symantec UTM, just randomly saying Symantec UTM solution. So you have an AMI already there. You buy it, you start using it right then and there. You don't have to go and buy it and get it deployed or something like that. It's already there as a virtual machine. You start deploying it and start using it. Obviously, you will be billed for it. And the questions are already done, I think. These are my credentials.
From where we can get it?
On the site, site naam kya hai? Inflexion convex.com, right? Inflexion convex.com.
We can't hear.
Demonstration, it will not be available on the website, and we are out of time and out of mission. Yes, yes, absolutely. Anytime you drop a mail, and if you are in Gurgaon, Delhi, I can actually visit you sometime and give you a brief demo. No issues. Oh, great. Sure, sure. Yeah, yeah. Sure, I'll just share my cards with you. We'll take it offline and you can take my credentials from you. Thanks a lot. It's all my pleasure. Oh, thank you.